Bitcoin breaks $50,000. This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B, for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. This is a milestone day. Bitcoin pushing beyond the psychological $50,000 barrier to a fresh all-time high of $50,584 for about 8 minutes at around 7:30 a.m. in New York. The XBX Bitcoin price pulling back as traders take profit, now sitting at $48,490. And that's according to TradeBlock data. The XBX has been the most reliable Bitcoin reference price for institutions since 2014, with billions in assets under management benchmarked against it. So another milestone to mention is BTC's market cap surpassing $1.5 trillion, ushering in a new class of nouveau riche. Joining me now with BTC Markets analysis from London is Chainalysis chief economist Philip Gradwell. Welcome, Philip.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Good to have you. So you sent us a couple of charts. It's an exciting day with data that might help explain how Bitcoin reached this milestone. So let's bring one of them up. The first one that caught my eye was one on the percentage of Bitcoin in the free float, which tends to decline. And that's the orange line we see over there before periods of price gain represented here in blue. Explain to our viewers what a free float is and why does it fall before a price gain?
So the Bitcoin free float is the percentage of the overall supply that's available to really be bought at any point in time. And so we classified that as Bitcoin that has been held for less than a year and that is also held by people who tend to circulate their Bitcoin. So we've removed all the Bitcoin, for example, that's being held by the hodlers who are just really holding on to it tightly.
Interesting.
And then it tends to decline before periods of price rise because when that free float goes down, that means that Bitcoin is getting scarcer. So actually there's more people who are just holding it as an investment and are less willing to sell it. And so we saw that actually before the 2017 price spike, people were getting interested in Bitcoin. They were coming in, buying, they were taking it and just holding it. And that meant there was fewer and fewer Bitcoin available to buy. As the demand came in, the price spiked. What's interesting as we came into 2020 is that actually from mid-March, when really the world realized that COVID was here to stay and people were searching for safe assets, people just started buying Bitcoin more and more, holding it as an investment, and therefore the amount available in the free float declined and prices have risen since then.
Okay, and the next chart shows new large investors acquired 1 million Bitcoin in November and December, but they have slowed purchases since then. So the orange line represents new large investors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, this is actually the story of why Bitcoin went over 20K up to where it is today. So going back into November, we're here looking in this orange line at the number of Bitcoin that's held in wallets that hold more than 1,000 Bitcoin each and that have held it for less than 3 months. So they've really been getting that Bitcoin very recently. And from mid-November, they just start buying in larger and larger amounts. And you can see that really follows that price increase in the blue line there. People who hold more than 1,000 Bitcoin, who've held for more than 2 years, they've had relatively stable holdings, whereas actually people that held for more than 3 months but less than 2 years, it looks like they actually sold some of their Bitcoin to those new entrants. But what was really interesting is that actually those new large investors, when we hit peak prices in early January, or at least peak prices back then, they stopped buying. But what's interesting is that that is actually the time that Tesla started to buy its Bitcoin. So there was a big wave of new investors coming in. Tesla actually, followed that, which is kind of strange for Tesla. They normally tend to lead a market.
Okay, I have some questions about that, but the remaining charts on whale activity, walk us through those. One says Bitcoin whales, that is large holders of Bitcoin, received record amounts of Bitcoin in the first 2 weeks of January. Are these institutional investors the Teslas, banks, hedge funds, and family offices of the world?
So there's really two groups in this data here. So there's definitely your Teslas of the world, your institutional investors, but there's also often over-the-counter brokers. That's why there's so much Bitcoin flowing into these wallets, because a lot of these will be brokering a deal, for two different sides of the party and then sending some of that Bitcoin on. But we definitely do see that peak in activity. It means that there was just a lot of Bitcoin flowing around some very large wallets in those first 2 weeks of January. In fact, more than we've seen before.
Right. I mean, we saw trading volumes peak also, and we saw that run up at the beginning of January. There's some suspicion that perhaps maybe that's when Tesla bought in. But we also have final two charts that have to do where these so-called whales get their Bitcoin from. 72% get it from exchanges. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so actually specifically, it's from fiat exchanges. Those are exchanges where people will be buying their Bitcoin with US dollars. And that's really important. If people know the broader ecosystem, there are some exchanges where, for example, you might trade Bitcoin for Tether or for other cryptocurrencies. And so when we see a very large amount of Bitcoin being sourced from these fiat exchanges, that means there are people who are buying with fiat, with dollars. And so it's really new money that's coming into the system. And that's what tends to drive the price up, rather than just crypto wealth being recirculated.
Okay, and the final chart shows 66% of Bitcoin sourced from fiat exchanges reached whales from an intermediary, like an OTC desk, right? So give us your interpretation.
Yeah. So what this chart does here, it breaks down the orange bar that was on that previous chart and says, well, how much of that Bitcoin that was received by these whales came directly from the exchanges? So that would be, an institution actually executing a set of buy orders on a centralized exchange. And that's only a third. Actually, 2/3 of all the Bitcoin that has been bought by these whales, it's come, as you said, via an intermediary, often like an over-the-counter broker. And that's because if you're really buying very large amounts of Bitcoin, even with the liquidity that's in today's market, you'll be doing that bilaterally without putting your orders into a central order book. And so this actually shows just how important the role of OTCs and other players like that is in the current market, and how much is happening off of the centralized exchanges, even if they are the ultimate source of liquidity.
Philip, the $1.5 billion question is, where did Tesla buy $1.5 billion of Bitcoin? I guess 66% chance it came from an OTC?
Yeah, exactly. So what seems to be happening here is there'll be a lot of OTCs who will be supplying some of that, but they might be sourcing that off a centralized exchange if they aren't able to find another counterparty to sell.
And where does the price go from here, given this data that you've shown us? What does it tell us? We reached the $50,000 milestone. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's always dangerous to make a price prediction in crypto because things go up as well as they go down. But for me, there's sort of two key facts. We've seen good fundamentals for Bitcoin since mid-March. So people buying in large amounts, taking it off the market, and just holding it for investment. What really drove prices up come November, December, were much deeper pocketed investors getting involved. What I find interesting is that actually, from mid-January, there was a bit of weakness in prices. We even went under $30,000, just that short time ago. And that was when those institutional buyers who bought in November, December actually stopped buying. And so the big question for me is, will the news of Tesla investing, of Bitcoin hitting 50,000, bring in a new wave of institutional investors? If it does, I'd expect the price to keep going higher. But if it doesn't, then maybe we go back to where we were in mid-January, where actually the price was trying to find a level around $30,000. So, there's a big range, but we only saw that very recently.
I'm curious, if we're seeing fewer large players put money into Bitcoin, where is this price surge coming from? Is it coming from retail?
Oh, so I think those new large investors are actually, they're still coming in the last week. I think the Tesla news gave that new life. It's the hot topic at the moment. I'm sure if you talk to anyone in the industry, interest has just ramped up in the last few weeks. And supply actually still is constrained. The amount of Bitcoin going into exchanges is pretty limited. And so I still think its institutions are really driving the floor of this market, but certainly there's a lot of retail that will kind of keep getting involved and being interested. So as with crypto, it's really a mix of both. Always has been, except institutions have been a much bigger driving force in the last 6 months than they have been before, and that'll probably keep taking us, in the next few months as well.
All right, great. Always appreciate it. All the information, all the data behind the price surge. Thank you very much, Philip.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right. That was Chainalysis chief economist Philip Gradwell in London. Coming up, makeup mogul and digital influencer extraordinaire Michelle Phan loves Bitcoin. Stick around. My next guest is known for producing high-quality do-it-yourself makeup tutorials on YouTube, but her beauty is more than skin deep. She is an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and vocal Bitcoin educator, teaching her 9 million YouTube followers the basics of Bitcoin and bringing it to the mainstream. Joining me now from Los Angeles is Michelle Phan, M Cosmetics founder and digital influencer. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Michelle, I am so thrilled to have you on. I learned how to apply makeup from you, and we are both fans of Sailor Moon.
Thank you. Oh, I love that. Yes, Moon Prism Power.
Yes! Many folks know you for your beauty and skin tips on YouTube, which you managed to turn into a $50 million business. But you are also a tech investor, a Bitcoin bull, and you actively tell your millions of social media followers to buy Bitcoin. Have any of your followers recently become millionaires?
I've actually received a lot of DMs when we hit, I think it was like 2 previous all-time highs this year, that one was able to quit their job and pay off their entire debt and buy a new house, which I thought was just, I mean, that's life-changing. I was thinking about how the past decade I've been sharing all these beauty tips, and now that I've experienced a lot in life, I thought it would be valuable to also teach anyone who's interested on just saving money and building generational wealth for yourself and for your future families.
That's incredible. Look beautiful and make money at it too. Your Twitter bio reads #Bitcoin, but your audience is mostly female and interested in beauty. So why did you feel like it was important to educate them on Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, if you look at history, even back in the 1950s, when we didn't have a lot of like female rights, women were still in charge of, they're in charge of purchasing power. They would buy everything at home. Like the husband would go out and work, and then the mother, the stay-at-home mother, would be in charge of just making sure everything is stockpiled at home. And I think it's important to also show that, as also a woman myself, I think financial sovereignty is something that I've always believed in, whether it's through being my own boss, or even in this case, like I mentioned before, like building generational wealth. And that's something that I didn't learn from school, and even my parents, they're immigrants, they didn't really learn that either. But there is this tradition, because I know like we're both Asian, of like when we're born, we're given gold. Our birthdays, sometimes you get like a gold bracelet or something. So there is something traditional about savings, which is gold. But Bitcoin is interesting because it's not physical, it's digital, but it is it's very similar in a sense to gold. And I think that was important for me to just share this knowledge, because that's what I've been doing since I've been online, is just sharing what has helped me in life, whether it's beauty, lifestyle tips, or in this case, savings tips.
Yeah. So you are also a venture capitalist. You have a VC firm with Ashton Kutcher called Sound Ventures. And together you two have put in a $3 million seed round into Lolly back in the day. You recently gave away $100 worth of Bitcoin during the Lunar New Year to promote the platform. It's kind of like Rakuten, where you shop to earn money, but in this case, you're actually shopping to earn Bitcoin. Have your followers responded well to this?
Yes, I think, well, just for clarification, Ashton Kutcher and I, we don't share a VC together. He has his own, I have my own too. But we do believe in the crypto space and, of course, Bitcoin, which is exciting. And yeah, Lolly, what attracted me to Lolly was just the aspect of mass adoption, because I think that's something that everyone in the Bitcoin space, we just don't know when it's going to happen. Like we see the network effect. The network effect has been there since the beginning. Bitcoin's been around for 12 years, so it's considered the granddaddy of all crypto, and it's not really going anywhere. In fact, if anything, it's increasing. It's becoming more and more valuable, and it's taking on a life of its own. So I was thinking to myself, okay, how can I be part of at least helping with mass adoption? Because Bitcoin doesn't really need marketing. It's been fine for 12 years. And so when I was approached by the CEO of Lolly, Alex, he walked me through his vision. And I'm a huge believer in not investing in a company, but the person. Because a company, sometimes it might not do well. I mean, I've also had a lot of failed businesses, but it's the persistence, it's the visionary that you want to invest in. And so I just knew that Alex had that spark in him, and I believed in him. And I love that he only wanted to focus on Bitcoin. That was my first question: is, are you going to bring any other cryptos? And he said, no, just Bitcoin. I'm like, great, I love that. And two, I think for my followers, a lot of them, they shop. They love shopping. They love a good deal. They also want cash back. But what's better than cash is cash that can make money and work hard for you, which is Bitcoin. So it just made sense because they don't have to actually buy Bitcoin. They can passively earn it, earn Satoshis, stack sats while they shop. So they don't really have to change any of their behaviors besides just adding this Chrome extension and soon to be app. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. So it's like a seamless, frictionless way to have some Satoshis and also be invited into learning more about this phenomenon.
Well, as you were saying, personal finance isn't taught. You certainly have to do your own research, which you did. And you were part of the decentralized movement in terms of content creation. And now you're joining the decentralized movement in finance. And now you're trying to share your knowledge, which is commendable. I wonder where you see your next play into Bitcoin in the crypto space. Where is that?
Oh, that's a great question. I still feel like we're in the beginnings. We're really still early in this space. And it does remind me very much of the early internet days. I'm talking about like the early .com days where you had more than just Google as a search engine. You had Alta Vista, Yahoo, you had all of these different search engines. And it was, in a sense, a wild, wild west. So my intuition tells me we're still early, so I don't want to be too hasty. I think it's important for me to even just take a few steps back even and kind of see what's going, because it's during times like this, it's very easy to fall for shiny lights.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, is I don't want to fall for all these shiny lights and, like industry terms and like trendy terms people are throwing around. Like a few years ago, it was all about ICOs. A few years ago before that, I mean, there's always something new. And a lot of people lost a lot of money making, just not doing research and just falling for these shiny lights. So I think for me, I just want to, I'm a hodler. Like I really believe in just holding, and because it's savings, like, yeah. It's like a piggy bank. Basically, Bitcoin is a grown-up piggy bank is how I see it. And I think as long as I understand that philosophy, and that's something I'm trying to actively tell a lot of my followers, like I'm not telling them, hey, you should trade, because that's another wormhole that you're going to have to another rabbit hole, that you have to go into and understand. But like things like Lolly, that's passive, that's easy. Swan Bitcoin is another great way to just passively stack sats and not have to think about it. Because we saw what happened with Wall Street bets. A lot of people got into it and it was very stressful. Like people are seeing that they put money in without even thinking and they lost a lot of money.
Michelle, I'm so sorry we have to wrap up the show, but thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michelle. That was Michelle Phan, M Cosmetics founder and digital influencer in LA. Time now for the chart of the day. 270 blockchain addresses have laundered around 55% of cryptocurrency associated with criminal activity last year, according to Chainalysis data. The orange columns show the total illicit value received, and the blue columns show deposit addresses. You can see that while a large amount of addresses linked to online scams or ransomware attacks receive small amounts of illicit value, large criminal funds go to a small number of addresses. Food for thought. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in New York for First Mover, your first look at the day's global crypto news headlines. You're watching CoinDesk TV.